Yeah, so liked your presentation, on the definition. It seems like you needed about an hour for the
Yeah.
presentation, so it's
Yeah,
quite,
I've given that same presentation with more details, and it took about an hour. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
bringing in the philosophy and so forth was, I think, interesting.
and
Help.
let's see
Yeah.
who else spoke. I saw the video that you posted, and so I started watching it yesterday, just while I was like making dinner and stuff. I was listening to it, and so I got through a little bit of. Is her name Catherine? Who spoke
Hmm.
after me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, what other types of speakers were there?
Um, well, what I'm going to be doing is I take it and I'll make a video clip of each
Of each one
person,
of them. Oh, that's great.
individually, and so you don't have to see that. And then I put each clip through the Otter AI and then create a separate page for everyone. And so it'll be you can go to that page and then easily review, their presentation.
Okay,
And
that'll be
then
great.
then I post it. Then I start posting it to LinkedIn like every, 4 or 5 days. I post another one. So and then I share it to a lot of the different groups I'm part of, and just to and on Facebook too. So
That's great. Yeah, you're
um,
so good about keeping things moving forward on social media. That's a big part of what you do, it seems.
yeah, well, yeah, we had 12. I don't know, we had 1,200 people sign up on LinkedIn. Like 35 show up. So it's I don't know what. But I think just thinking in terms of movement building now and we've put out a lot on the empathy circle. Done a lot of summits on the empathy circle. We have one coming up on the 8th, which you'd signed up for. So,
Yeah,
um,
November 8th, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Can't remember the topic. Or you wanted to look at the philosophy behind it, I think it was.
Okay. I need to look back at my abstract and make sure that I'm working toward that. What time of day is that at?
It's the same time.
Okay. I'm going to
And
put
I
that
don't
in.
have the schedule yet for the times when people are you clear that day, or is there any time that's
Yeah, I should be good. I should be open that day.
so
Uh,
yeah, they're all the presentations. I can see people have their own. Like there's somebody empathy in the schools. She does work, and then she's sort of putting it into the framework of empathy movement. Somebody else had something they called empathy first responders. So how do
hmm.
you respond with empathy to kind of the crises that you see around you, kind of in person? And then she puts it into the context of the empathy movement. So people have all these different things they're doing, and they're putting it into with the summit, putting it into the context of being part of an empathy movement is what I'm trying to get people to think in terms of. So
Yeah, that's great. And
it's
how
kind
could we benefit each other in the
of
process?
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah,
So there was.
that's great.
Uh, um, and so then we don't have any speakers yet for next year, January. So as soon as I get through this, then I'm going to have to get ready for the next summit. Get everybody lined up, and then kind of get people lined up for next year. And so what I'll probably do is I'll create like an event for be a speaker at the summit, and then just start inviting people on LinkedIn. And oh, I'm asking everybody who has presented to invite someone. So to kind of get
We can
people
snowball it.
involved. Yeah, so if you can invite somebody if you want to
Okay.
invite Gary or somebody to speak, or
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, I
uh,
think it's Garrett, by the way.
Garrett. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he would be happy to speak. Because he's looking for more platforms to share what he has learned about
Mhm.
empathy between autistic and neurotypical people, and just trying to kind of get a snowball moving because he's really used to speaking to academic audiences. He's
Mhm.
done a lot of that, but he's trying to move out into the broader community as well and feels a little bit like it's funny, he feels out of his depth, but
Hmm.
he's a neuroscientist who
Mhm.
is way more educated than the rest of us, but he feels a little bit nervous trying to step out into the broader community. Just there's a lot of different reasons when you're in academia, the incentives are not there for sharing your research with the broader community,
Hmm.
because it doesn't benefit you in any way to share it with the world. Like, you have very strict guidelines of what you're supposed to do, which is to publish in specific journals, and you're supposed to write in a very specific way that is to a very specific audience. And that's how you advance in your academic career. And so academics don't often see the value of sharing to the broader community, whereas he does see the value,
Hmm.
but he's nervous because then, like, does that undermine him in the
Hmm.
eyes of his academic peers? And
Hmm.
which it's I think it's kind of a messed up incentive structure, but that is what it is. And
Hmm.
so I'm sure that was a really long way of answering your question. I think he would be really excited to speak at it.
Yeah, that one's going to be on the movement
Yeah.
for
Okay.
January.
I also know
Or,
somebody who does a lot of interfaith work, which I think would be really interesting to bring that perspective in as well, because it's very similar to, like, conservatives and liberals talking to each other, where, I'm right and you're wrong. And so we kind of get entrenched in our belief system, and we fail to see any of the value that the other side can bring. And so when you're bridging that gap with interfaith work, it's very similar. So would that be something that would resonate well
anything. I'm
with you?
good with anybody if they have empathy background, something that they feel comfortable thinking in terms of a movement. Because that's the part of the purpose of the Empathy Summit, to bring in anyone. We're kind of bringing them into the movement by having them speak about it. So it's totally
Okay. Well,
open to
I'll reach out to
anyone.
him as well.
Mhm.
I'll reach out to him as well. And I mean, I don't think he uses the word empathy as much, but he's doing the exact same work. But he's helping people to see each other's perspectives, which is empathy.
Yeah, sounds like
Yeah. So
empathy.
it's the same thing. Also, I wanted to ask you, in my presentation, was there anything that you didn't agree with, like maybe anything that we could discuss further in depth?
Hmm.
Was there any feedback from anybody, like, where they didn't agree with anything? I'm just curious if we could open up
No,
that.
not yet. I mean, haven't. I mean, there's nothing that came to mind. The thing, the approach I had in terms of definitions, you're kind of giving the sort of the background in, and you didn't come up, I think, with the definition part, right? It's like you're kind of giving, you're focusing on the space in between. So it's kind of like holistic empathy that
Mhm.
you're kind of saying the underlying, it's the relationship is the point you're making, right?
Yeah,
Is that
and then on the very last slide, when I had like 1 minute left, that's when I shared your definition that you have on the Defining Empathy website. And I would have liked to go much more in depth in that and, like, piece it apart and talk about why each one of those components is in there. Just ended up running out of time. So
Mm,
if I were to do it again, I would have taken out some of the stuff about, like, measurement and psychology and some of the debates in there, and gotten more quickly focused in on the actual definition.
yeah, the kind of with the presentation I did, I was trying to start with the definition, like, hey, here's the definition. We're using, I mean, and yeah, it's whatever approach you take is up to you. But that was, and then go through so that people have a definition, a framework,
Mm.
to
Mhm.
operate from, and then go through and address all the other sort of issues. But yeah, that was sort of approach I was just
Yeah, well, that
working
makes
on.
sense. And if I speak in the future on the same topic, I will definitely do that differently.
But whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but just whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, no, but I can definitely see the value of that, having it at the beginning, because I guess the approach I was taking is kind of working our way through history, and, like,
Hmm.
we have all of these problems, and this is our response to it,
Hmm.
and this is how
Yeah.
we've tried to address all of the different definitions that don't make sense with each other and that have led to these other really negative things. And so it was kind of going to be like this big, like, reveal at the end, I guess, what I was
I
going
see.
for. Yeah.
Well, I like the philosophy. I think that's what you were going to talk about next was the philosophy, right, in the next
That's
talk,
right.
because you're saying just the philosophical trends, and ending with Buber and his focus on the relationship and I thou. I mean, I found
Yeah,
that interesting. Yeah, how to
yeah,
tie
I
that
find
all
that
together.
really interesting because when we're so obsessed with measuring it in psychology, we often forget to look back at our underlying assumptions. And if our underlying assumptions are very egoistic, then we're measuring kind of the wrong thing.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the literature just really isn't reflecting kind of the type of empathy that we're talking about. That really is more of a relationship focused empathy.
Yeah, and even what were the philosophical trends, that kind of led in terms of you had that picture. Was it you had the picture of it was the art person
Yeah.
in the art? Yeah, so I use that a lot too. It's like, that the picture of the art that you're sensing into the work. And then why did the aesthetic philosophers want to create that term Einfühlung, right? And if it was that sort of a reaction to sort of a mechanistic view of the world, that was maybe being developed, and then they said, oh, we need to bring in the felt experience, the
Mm.
feeling part. And I was never
Yeah.
really quite clear on
I think
why
it's
they got
interesting.
into. Huh?
I think we should read more into that and find out more of the background. What really surprises me is how psychology appropriated it and made it, oh, this is how people interact with other humans. But that's really, it's not the same. When you're talking about a piece of art
Hmm.
versus a human, it's a very different relationship.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that. I was wondering if you see a piece of art, though, it's a expression of someone's emotions, their vision, their felt experience. Really good art is going to sort of capture deeper feelings. And can you sort of feel into that in terms of just as them being a person that you're sort
Yeah,
of
that's a good point.
you're reading them? And I kind of wonder about that too in terms of if you just look outside, the houses, the roads is all an expression. It's people expressing themselves. It's the culture expressing itself, and you're sort of sensing into the expression that people have made, and what the car design is, what the house design is. You're sort of picking up the energy. So there could be again. Then we're into the imaginative empathy, and then the sensing into too. So I just kind of wonder, there could be an aspect to that we are feeling into a work of art of we're
Yeah.
feeling into the soul of the artist, sort of in a
No,
sense.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. The definition that I found online, it was online etymology dictionary or whatever it was
Mhm.
called, like just talking about where that word came from. It said that it's the individual who's looking at the art
Mhm.
is portray like they're imbuing it with
Mhm.
their
Right.
view
Mhm.
of it. So, I mean, if you are trying to understand the artist and feel like sense into why they prepared it in such a way, like I think that's a different experience
Mhm. Yeah.
than saying this is how I interpret it.
Yeah, it was for more of a projection. That's how I've heard the term used too. I mean, Einfühlung is it's sort of a projection
Yeah,
in
which
that
I think
case of
is
the art.
yeah, I think it's kind of flawed when we use that in psychology.
And yeah, I wonder with the Einfühlung if projection is imagining, there's so if it's imaginative empathy, right? Because imaginative empathy, I can imagine what your experience is, but I'm sort of projecting it on you. I don't know, we don't know if it's really accurate or not, which is a different phenomenon for me listening to you and sensing what's coming across sort of directly. So.
Yeah, I think it's a completely different process. So yeah, I want to read more about it and see if there's more like in-depth philosophical history around the word. So good thing we have Otter AI
Mhm.
transcribing all of this, and we can go
Yeah.
back and remember that we wanted to do this.
And then the
Yeah,
other part you were sort of focusing on was the relationship that you are in sort of the space between people, right? Is that what you're in the presentation, like an awareness of that, which is, I think, yeah, the more the holistic,
yeah,
the quality of the relationship.
yeah. I think I've told you about this paper I'm working on with a psychology professor who's much more of a philosopher than a psychologist. But he's really deconstructing all of the philosophical foundations of how we look at empathy, and trying to build it up with these
Mm-hmm.
other philosophical underpinnings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I got a lot of that philosophical work from. So I need to actually finish that paper. We need to, there's always like just another thing. There's always something.
But
I
what's the gist of that? What in terms of philosophy, what's he taking apart and what's he putting together?
It really is a lot of that egoistic, like the empathy process happens inside the individual. So deconstructing that, like very Freudian egoistic approach, and bringing it into that space in between the people,
Mm-hmm.
um, and recognizing he's a big Heidegger and Levinas fan, and they're really focused on like the subjective interpretation of the world, and like recognizing that my subjective interpretation of things is different from your subjective interpretation. And so although they don't use the term empathy in their writings, maybe they do a little bit, but I haven't seen any yet. um, they're talking about just reconstructing the way that we view other people in a way that's more um, like seeing them um as infinite, I guess is a good word for it, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
infinitely incomprehensible and powerful, and beyond our own imaginations. And so if we only see it as, well, I imagine that you would feel this way because this is how I feel, we're diminishing them in that
Mm-hmm.
way. Anyway, so it's a pretty cool paper. We just need to, it's he wrote it a while ago, and he's having me kind of like condense it and reformat it for publication, which is sometimes harder than just writing a paper yourself
Yeah.
because you have to try and work with the same structure and try not to lose the content but make it more comprehensible. There's just a lot of weird aspects to it.
Well, what comes up for me again is the empathy circle itself, like trying to always ground, uh, what we're talking about in the empathy circle, because I see the empathy circle as a practical process, in terms of it's something that we can actually use in how we relate, with people and the underlying energy, of it, the mindset of it. And so it kind of grounds it in the practicality of relating.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because if we're so caught up in philosophizing about it, then we forget that it's actually about real people and real
Mhm.
interactions that could really benefit from it. And so, yeah, keeping it practical, I think, is essential.
And I love to philosophize about the context of the empathy circle, right? What's happening within, how does that philosophy sort of fit into
Hmm.
the empathy circle? Because I know with Buber, Buber and Rogers had a conversation, and which is recorded in a book I've seen on Amazon. And as I understand it, he said to Rogers, "You're never going to have an I-thou relationship in the therapeutic context
Hmm. Yeah.
because it's not." Whereas I think he would have said, "Well, you can have an I-thou relationship, in an empathy circle because it's equals coming together, and you're not having that standoff. You're not standing off and only doing the listening to your client." So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit to taking it out of the therapeutic context. And no, I'm not throwing shade at anybody who's even a lot of my friends here at the university are clinical psychologists or studying to be clinical psychologists. But uh, they the way they see it is that they're doing the real work, and then we're just like those of us who are just researchers are not
Mm-hmm.
doing real work.
Mm.
But the way I see it is we're taking it into more like practical on the ground contexts, whereas it's not, for them it's just the client and the therapist, and so they're looking at that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the world that they are studying, is in that one context. And I agree with you that taking it out of that context and putting it into more of a maybe more of a practical setting where people are equals is really, really valuable. I'm also curious. So this is something that I want to research, maybe not right now, but at some point, is power dynamics as well. Like trying to maintain an I thou relationship, but when there's a clear hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
in a relationship. So if there's, a boss and his or her employee, like there's a very clear power dynamic there that is there for a reason. But then how do you maintain that I thou relationship when there's that differential? And I don't know. I don't know if people do it very well. And that causes a lot of problems, like in organizations and families, where we're not fully listening to the perspective of people who are beneath us,
Mm-hmm.
because legitimately they are, like, either they're younger than us or they have less power than us in some way. And so we kind of discount their feelings and their perspective on something.
Yeah, it'd be like having a teacher and the students doing an empathy circle, or a CEO and some workers. What would be the outcome? What
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting.
I think it would the reflection, I mean, part of sort of power seems to be who gets heard. Whose voice matters the most. And if in an
Yeah.
empathy circle you have equal time, it's really shifts the. I mean, people talk about the equality of an empathy circle. And I think it's the mutual listening that creates that. I mean, you still are kind of maybe worried about what you're saying and how it's going to affect it when you're out of the circle. But yeah, you can have issues like that.
Yeah. And do you ever find it interesting when you are in the empathy circle and then you come out of it and you're then interacting again? Do you find it um, do you find that relationships have improved after, for the most part, and people then continue to listen to each other more effectively? Because that's something that I would like to look at, is does
Hmm.
this actually change their listening style after the empathy circle, or do they do really well in the empathy circle and then they go back to not listening anymore? Is that
Well,
anything you've been
yeah,
able to
the
see?
I just one person who's in Santa Barbara. I was just meeting with her and someone else, a couple of days ago, and she says, in the empathy circle, she's kind of heard. And she says, but I go into the regular world and I don't have it. People don't, listen. So there's a sense of being heard in the cult, in general conversations. You don't
Hmm.
feel heard. So that there's that part. Um, Sometimes I've had it where you have a deep conversation and then in the empathy circle, and it's like, well, what do I do now? And how do I relate now? Yeah, in just the regular conversations. Some people are just good at regular conversations, and I do know with it would also be a function of the length, because I know that I've experienced, like in our family empathy circles, where we've gone like 2.5, 3 hours, in a empathy circle, and then we actually just stop using the reflection because it's so ingrained that there's a shift, there's sort of a click, a shift in quality, that we're really present with each other. You don't even need to do active listening anymore. You just sort of shift it into the mindset, and you've sort of developed trust. So I always find that an interesting experience.
That's interesting when it's with people that you see a lot, like because you've done a lot of empathy circles with people you don't know. And so you don't really, it's like an emergency room kind of setting where like they come in, you help them with this one issue, or you listen to them a little bit and then they go on with the rest of their lives, right? So like I liken it to an emergency room because my
Hmm.
brother's a doctor and he works in an emergency room and never gets to see what happens downstream from that. But then for you with your family, when you're having an empathy circle, you get to see the long term effects and benefits of it. So I think that would be an interesting thing to study as well. Is not just how it helps people improve their relationships and feeling heard during the circle, but then how it shifts relationships over time. I think
Yeah,
that would be
one
really
thing I'm seeing is you need it on a regular basis because I've had the issues with my brother and sister-in-law,
right.
so she has bipolar and she's been just recently been committed multiple times,
Oh,
with
wow.
bipolar. And you get these calls and it just causes all kinds of family kind of issues, where they're kind of lashing out at people, my sister and other family members. And she was a real supporter of the empathy circle, the sister-in-law who,
Hmm.
but and when we would do it, uh, and she seemed to benefit from it. And the thing is I think that for something like that, it should be incorporated into the family. Like at dinner every day, it seems to me they should have had like an empathy circle. Everybody sits around, has an empathy circle. So it's just like doing it once or twice here and there it's it's not gonna create the shift that the mindset shift. It seems to me it's got to be a regular, ongoing sort of a process, and they didn't do that at home.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, because I can see, I mean, there are people in my life where like we've talked about empathy, we've like learned more about it and we've gotten better at it, but then it's like we default back.
hmm
I've seen these people default back to, well, this isn't how I normally do things. And so it hasn't really been a matter of training as much as is like, well, yeah, that was fine and it worked. But now when I get into a real world situation, I'm not any different than I was before.
hmm
Yeah, so I see the long term benefit of it. In a like family dinner setting, do you think it would be feasible to do it in like a 20-minute block when
I th-
everybody's able to sit down together?
I think you could do like everybody gets one. You just do one round. Everybody gets a chance to be heard, and it's sort of timed. I think
I love that
you've got a family, you could test it out.
idea. I want to do that with my family.
Hmm.
I'm going to report back next. Yeah. Because you haven't really done this much with kids, right?
I've done it with my nephews and nieces when they were like 5 and 6 years
Oh,
old.
okay.
And, I've mediated, they had a conflict. And I remember one, and, my niece is like 5 at the time, and my nephew is 6. And they're kind of aggressive in that family, so the boys kind of beat up on the girls, they get and then there was a conflict between them. And I said, okay, well, let's have an empathy circle. So I started by reflecting each one, just like we do. And then I had them reflect back each other. And, and then they kind of, you could see the conflict, the sort of the constellation of the conflict kind of gets shared. People, they start seeing each other, and they get familiar with the process of, oh, I can actually listen and be heard and explain myself. That family is very much like they let the kids just, you know, do whatever until they get to the point that they get angry. Then they, shut them down. That's their sort of approach. Or they, yell at them, or or don't do that. Don't you tell them don't do this anymore. And sort of saying who and judging, being the judges of whatever, and they feel like, oh, my side wasn't heard. It was kind of unfair. What I saw. So anyway, so they were sort of experiencing a different, mindset when I
Mhm.
was, facilitating that. And I just remember at the end of it, my niece, she's only 5 years old. She says, "Oh, I like empathy circles. Let's do it again."
Oh,
It
that's
was,
so
it was
awesome.
like, because she got to be heard and not, so it wasn't the force wasn't the brute force of my aggressive little nephews, uh, wasn't sort of dominating.
Yeah.
And I think I told you the story too of my. Uh, there was another conflict, actually with the same niece and the other nephew who's like a year older, maybe 7, and he had gotten angry because they had made popsicles, with ice cubes, or something, and tray, and the niece had eaten his popsicle. So he was like totally pissed off or angry and upset. And he ran to his bedroom and he just laid down on his bed and wasn't going to talk to anyone. And so my sister-in-law and I was there. My sister-in-law says, "Okay, do your empathy work. Let me see what you can do." So I go over to him and I say, "Oh, are you feeling, you want to talk about it?" And it's like, just not saying anything. So, oh, okay. So I hear you don't want to talk about it, and you're feeling, you're feeling angry, and or upset. And so he didn't speak a lot, but I just reflected back sort of the emotions that I saw him have. And then my niece, came into the room, and then I kind of reflected her, and kind of did it kind of back and forth, even though he wouldn't speak to her. And then somehow I came out like, well, what can we do? And the niece, said, well, I could make another popsicle for him, So he was gonna, and then he kind of lit up and was like, okay, I'll do that. And they ran off and did he was going to make him another popsicle. But anyway, it's kind of reflecting both of them. You kind of, some they can't if he's not speaking. I'm just reflecting his what I'm reading him.
Yeah.
Like oh, I hear you don't want to speak. Is that right? Or you're upset, or and so anyway, 5, 6 years, 7 years old, they're already and I've done it with high school students too at Stanford. There's a class of high school students that take Stanford classes. They had like a event there, and I took the empathy tent there actually to that event. Was invited, and we set up the tent, and the students came in and had them do the empathy circle. But that culture was kind of like put downs, like everybody was putting everybody else down all the time. So it was a little bit hard to do an empathy circle with them because of these constant put downs and trying to make fun of everything. But then there was some students who weren't part of that inner clique, and they were sort of new students, to the program. And I did an empathy circle, and they just loved it because it was a space where they could feel a connection, to other students, and they talked, quite personally about what was going on for them. So there's a lot of different contexts, but I think it can already, can be applied. How old are your children?
15 down to 6.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it would work really well. So in those situations with your niece and nephews, it doesn't seem like it was um, it was like your format was slightly different because you were kind of teaching them how to do the reflective listening. So you were the listener,
Hmm.
the active listener, and they were kind of observing. Like the other one who wasn't the listener was
Hmm.
just observing. And then when you would switch and talk to the other child, then they were being heard, and the other child was the silent listener.
Yeah. To begin with, that's the same way we do the mediation. We do the left-right mediation at these demonstrations. People come into the empathy tent, and I first model it by doing the listening to
Hmm.
them, and then I get them to do it with each other once. once it's been modeled and they can see how it works.
Yeah, that's really great.
And
Um,
actually, at 1 o'clock, Lou is he's been doing a restorative empathy circle training with the group. We do what we call semi-simulated circles. So someone takes a conflict, and then you role play. So I don't know if you have a conflict, but it's on your mind. You come into the circle, and then the other participants, you assign them to be uh, take on the role of the different people in the conflict.
hmm,
So you can say it's person X, you're person Y. You give a little bit of their personality, and then you actually have an empathy circle role playing the conflict and people talking about the conflict. So you can take it into that using that's sort of like using imaginative empathy, and it's the same thing we've done too with in the training. I'd set up for our empathy circle facilitator training, I had an extra class a session where we had a scenario of everybody there's the family, they're in conflict, siblings, their parents have died, there's a couple $100,000 in the inheritance, they all feel that they deserve it, and they have to argue with each other why they should get it, so create a scenario. And then they just role play. You just kind of role play it so you can kind of experience it from sort of the imaginative. You're kind of combining the imagination as well as the active listening, direct empathy. So anyway, the point is there's just a lot of different constellations of how the in the empathy circle teaches you sort of the basics of the process that can be
mhm.
kind of expanded out.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, I'll report back to you next week or in 2 weeks
Okay.
after having met with my family. And I think at the dinner table is a good time to do it. I'll find a day when we don't have people like racing off to do something else, because that's usually how it goes, where we have like 5 minutes where we can
Mm-hmm.
get everybody sitting at the table at the same time. And we try and talk about our days, or like yesterday, we were asking everybody, what's the weirdest dream you've ever had?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we do try to spark conversation that brings people together. But I do think that having like just modeling it in the empathy circle, I think will help with a lot of the interpersonal conflict that we do have in our family, which I think would be really beneficial for everybody to see to see the listening happening and see that, oh, I should be doing that listening too. So I think that that's going to be really beneficial. So I'm excited to try it. Um, I know that I've said that in my research, I may want to look more in depth at the empathy circle. And so I was curious how you would feel about so I have 3 research assistants that are working with me, and they're all interested in studying empathy. And so, like, I'm excited to have a team of people who want to study this topic.
Mm.
So I was wondering how you would feel about us taking some of the recordings of some of your empathy circles, and doing some qualitative analysis on it. So that's basically looking at who spoke the most, what kinds of words did they use, what were the topics that they talked about, kind of I guess from situation to situation it's going to be like different actual themes that come out, but looking more at the quality of the interactions, I think would be really interesting. Would you feel comfortable with us doing that?
Absolutely. That's why they're online, is that they're there for that reason. Yeah, so you pretty much just need to go to the my channel and just go down and look for the ones, and there would be a separate video for the summits too, like the summits. Uh, Cafe empathy circles are recorded too.
Okay. Yeah,
So
that's
any of them, yeah,
powerful.
and you're welcome to do whatever you want with them. Yeah. So,
Okay, thank you. I probably still need to run it by our institutional review board to see what they think of it. Even though it's all, I was just asking ChatGPT last night, like, am I allowed to do this since it's all existing data? And it said you usually can do it without IRB approval, but I said, well, I actually know the person who is the creator of this content. So does that change anything?
Mm,
And it said, oh, it probably does change it. You probably do need to get IRB approval. Um, and so I'll run it by them and see if I have to go through the whole process,
mm-hmm,
which who knows? It could take months before I could
mm-hmm.
start on it. But if they're okay with it and I can just expedite the process, then we can start on it pretty soon.
You could do a circle with with those people too,
Yeah, I was thinking
the
that maybe
assistant.
this week I will do that with them, just so they can get familiarized with what it's like to experience an empathy circle.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we're studying it more, they have more of a like firsthand experience with it, and they connect more with it.
Other thing I
Yeah.
wanted to do was a marathon. Like, what would like do a recorded call, like an 8 hour empathy circle, right? Get five, six people into an empathy circle. And what happens if you're just doing it in an empathic, active listening, you know, after, you can go to the bathroom, bring your food to the table, whatever. But it just being in that mode, what would it be? And I keep thinking of doing it maybe one Saturday, so,
That sounds really amazing.
and
And I'm sure
recorded.
it would be, yeah, I think it would be emotionally exhausting because I mean, although it's like you feel more alive after a circle, like you're so conscientious of how you're interacting with each other that I think you would just be exhausted by the end of that.
I've done 4 hour empathy circles with,
Wow.
my brother and sister, and it was so interesting. The phenomenon that uh, it's like it's sort of like the holistic empathy and awareness. We talk about the space, being aware of the space, and we were talking about childhood memories. Like, what do we remember? Just growing up. The different stories, and my partner Joan was there too, and oh, and my brother and my sister-in-law and my sister was there. So that was like five of us, I guess. Five, yeah, five of us, and so we're talking about childhood memories. But what happened, it becomes like I could kind of feel the space, right? The energy of the room. And after like a couple hours, we're just talking about childhood memories, the interpersonal conflicts seem to come up. So I remember it was almost like feeling like a cauldron, like it's a cauldron, and like stuff is bubbling up into the feelings, like a conflict bubbles up into the cauldron. And it was like a conflict between my, sister-in-law and, my brother, right? Kind of interpersonal problem. And then they talked about it a little bit, and then a conflict between my sister-in-law and Joan, my partner, kind of bubbled up, and so all these little conflicts would sort of, it was almost like I could see them bubbling, the energy of them coming into the space, and you could feel it
Wow.
sort of dissipate. So anyway, I think that it's something like that awareness of, it's almost like that's the holistic empathy, is an awareness of the space between us and the energies, and it's like the feelings within myself. We had done that where we're talking about the felt experience within ourselves, and you can feel feelings in different parts of your body. I can feel something arise in one part of my body, and it can grow and shrink, or the colors can change, or the texture can change. But to have that sense within the whole group, and also just how the conflicts,
Hmm.
energy would come into that space. So anyway, I think that's the marathon would kind of maybe lead to a deeper awareness of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That would be really cool. I would love to analyze that whole thing. It'd be
Mhm.
super interesting to see how it shifts over time.
Yeah, I did want to record it too. Yeah.
Who do you plan to have be a part of that? Do you
I don't know
have in mind?
anybody. I keep talking about it. It's just a matter of taking the time. If you said, "Hey, I want to do it," then we'd have two of us, and I'd find three. It would give me motivation for make it. To just set a Saturday aside to do it. So I
Um,
just
I
have to
I just know that I wouldn't be able to do it for
for
that long
time.
with
Yeah, I doubt.
kids. They would just constantly be like, "Mom, what are you doing?" And just I don't I know it wouldn't work. It would only work if I didn't have classes and I didn't have my kids at home. So it would have to be on a weekday that I didn't have any other responsibilities in order for that to work for me. But it just sounds fascinating
Yeah. I mean,
and
I can just
exhausting.
send out a, yeah, I can send out an email to people and say, oh, I need four more people and who wants to take part in this? I just have to do it. But I just keep
Yeah.
talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got enough fully invested people that I'm sure you'd be able to find people
Hmm.
that would
Yeah.
jump at that.
So,
I should probably go early because today is actually the funeral of our church leader, um, who is like the global leader of our church, and he passed away last week. So
mhm.
that's starting in 9 minutes. So I want to take
Oh,
a
okay.
break and come back and be able to watch the funeral.
Okay.
But anyway, I'll keep you updated on things with looking qualitatively at everything you have online. There's just you have so much information online that
Yeah.
it's just like a wellspring of different things that we could look at to learn more about empathy. So I
Okay.
appreciate all that.
And you'll report on your family empathy circle in two
Yes, I
weeks as
will.
well. Okay. Very
Oh, I
good.
wanted to ask you one last question. Each one of those mini empathy circles that you did with your niece and nephews, how long did it take?
Maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. I think that I could make that happen with my kids. They have short
It
attention spans, so long with
yeah.
them would be challenging.
Yeah, it became to the point where, they'd start getting in a fight and I'd say, we have a conflict. What do we do? And they'd reflect back, we have an empathy circle. So I was
Uh,
trying to train them to hold
yes,
empathy circles.
I love it. I wonder if they've ever done it without your assistance.
That's where he has to become institutionalized, I think, in the family. I don't know. I'm kind of curious too, because it's not, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see that shift in my own family to see the kids know how to handle
Hmm.
conflict.
Yeah, it's like they say, "Oh, we got a conflict," and we just put that into our for our training because there's some conflict, and it's actually it's part of the training. His is our policy on how to address conflict. That somebody can call for an empathy circle, a restorative empathy circle. So it's like a process that you can just step into, and that's what our meeting is with Lou. Is we want to train people on how to be facilitators for uh, a restorative empathy circle, which is more, there's more resources besides the empathy circle that can be added to the empathy circle, like steps for the higher the level of conflict, you need kind of more structure and more processes. And, I can talk about that sometime if you want.
Yeah,
The So the empathy circle is just the starting point. You can just keep building and building, adding all kinds of different other steps to it for different contexts.
that's really cool. And when's your next empathy facilitator training?
Starts Saturday.
Okay. And what time is that at?
Up, see,
So like 9 to 1.
it's 10. Okay, let me see. I just put it in. It's just best empathy training. So it's 10 to 12:30 Pacific. And here's the schedule for the year. So the next one's so it's after we have a summit, and then I think 2 weeks later is a training, and so we have four trainings lined up for next year.
Okay. I will consider this. I'll see if I can fit it into my schedule.
Mhm.
Um, I might be able to. I'm going to be traveling on the third session during that exact same time. Um, but these other ones I could make it there for.
Yeah, just let Bill know.
Okay.
Right. See you
Yeah,
in
because
2 weeks.
I wanted to take it over the summer, but that ended up I couldn't end up attending all of them, so had to drop out of it. All right. Well, I will let you know how
Okay,
things go.
great. Bye.
Have a good week, a good two
You.
weeks.